Welcome and thanks for joining me for the Gut Health Turnaround Series 2.0, 21 Ways to Heal Your Gut, Reclaim Your Energy, and Look and Feel Amazing. My name is Leah Klein, and I am Health and Wholeness Coach, and I'm your host. Today I'm being joined by Hannah Crum. Thank you for being here.
Great to be here, Leah.
And she's going to be talking about kombucha and the human microbiome. Hannah Crum is the Kombucha Mama, the founder of the Kombucha Camp Workshop, which evolved from the kombuchacamp.com when she partnered with her husband, Alex Ligori. K-Camp's mission is changing the world one gut at a time, which is accomplished through empowering others to safely brew kombucha at home by providing quality information, quality supplies, and quality support. Along with her partner, Alex Ligori, Hannah is also an industry journalist and a master brewer, directly mentoring thousands of new and experienced kombucha brewers and providing consultation services for kombucha startups since 2007. Together, Hannah and Alex also co-founded Kombucha Brewers International in 2014 to support the commercial kombucha industry by promoting and protecting access to bottled kombucha all around the world, where Hannah serves as the president. Their 400-page full-color The Big Book of Kombucha from Story Publishing, published in March of 2016, has already garnered much acclaim. Hannah is also a leader and featured speaker in the real food movement, using the kombucha lifestyle as an introduction to other fermented foods, gut health, the human microbiome, and bacteriophagy, something like that, and more. So why don't you get us started by, how did you first get involved in nutrition?
Well, like everybody, I was born and I had to eat. And so I started eating pretty much a standard American diet. I'm of that generation where it was more convenient to have cereal and milk and TV dinners and things like that. So I grew up pretty much eating all of those foods that now I typically stay away from for the most part. And, you know, that was, I think, partly due to the programming, the information, the propaganda and advertising that we've received for many years in order to sell products, as opposed to really looking at the root causes of our health. And the interesting thing is, I didn't come to nutrition as a result of having any kind of ailment or illness in specific, which a lot of people find kombucha and many of these healthy foods because they're dealing with the gift of an illness. I was rather fortunate in that I call it kombucha kismet. I was visiting a friend who had moved to San Francisco, and when we got a tour of their very groovy apartment back in the early 2000s, one of the stops along the way was a box, and in the box were these jars covered with cloths, and they go, "That's the kombucha." I never heard of it, had no idea what the heck that stuff was, but it's one of those kind of really fun words, and it stuck in my mind. So when I got back to LA in the early 2000s from that trip, I went to Whole Foods, and lo and behold, there was an entire case of kombuchas waiting for me to try them. So I grabbed one off the shelf, I cracked it open, I took a sip, and for me, it was love at first sip. You know, I know that's not everybody's experience. A lot of people, the first time they try kombucha, you get kombucha face. It's a little tart, it's a little tangy. But that flavor really resonated with me because growing up, I was the kid sneaking the pickle juice out of the pickle jar despite my mom yelling at me not to do that. But I really love that kind of salty, tangy, really savory type of flavor. And so kombucha spoke to me. Have you tried it, Leah?
I don't think I have yet. I make my own coconut yogurt, and that's kind of one of my main outlets into the fermented,
Definitely, that's tangy in and of its own right. So, you know, and I love that you mentioned the coconut yogurt because, you know, really when it comes to the human microbiome, we're an organism that is comprised of many organisms, many of which, you know, the old numbers for calculating it has us outnumbered 10-1 by bacteria and yeast and microbes and things like that. Newer calculations show it's more, you know, just over half of us it belongs to those cells. But the point being that there's a multitude of fermented foods and drinks that we can incorporate into our lifestyle to make us feel good again. And that's because the vast majority of what it is we're feeding when we consume is the microscopic organisms that live inside of our bodies. And so, you know, I always like to emphasize that it's not just kombucha that's going to potentially have a helpful impact on your life, but kefir, coconut kefir, kvass, sauerkraut, any of these are going to have a really great benefit.
Mm-hmm. So when did you first start learning about, you know, gut health in connection with this?
Right. So I started making kombucha in 2003. I found all of the resources here in LA, went to the library, great place to find information. Of course, the internet as well, but I like books. So I also sourced a culture locally and just started making it. At that time, it was more learning about fermentation, understanding the role of fermentation. I really knew nothing about it at the time. So, you know, referencing Sandor Katz's seminal work, Wild Fermentation, was really helpful to kind of get a handle on this huge world that I knew nothing about. And, you know, the gut microbiome, the Human Microbiome Project didn't start until 2010. So I've been fermenting for many years before this information started to kind of trickle out. And being totally fascinated with bacteria when, and I had followed the Human Genome Project, right? That's kind of the front runner to the Microbiome Project. Is we wanted to look at the genome, decode it, figure out novel solutions for ailments. And throughout that process, what they realized is while they knew bacteria existed inside and on our bodies, they had no idea, they being the scientists, had no idea what function they served. And it wasn't until they got really into our DNA that they understood, you know, we can't go any further with this research until we know what it is bacteria are doing in our systems. And that's kind of the genesis for that microbiome project. And so it was really fascinating. And I think part of why kombucha is enjoying such a rush of popularity in this exact moment is because of this information coming out about how vital it is that we be, you know, bacteria powered, that we embrace our, what I call bacteriosapien nature, which is we have this unique relationship. And, you know, I say unique relationship, really what I mean is, you know, every living creature on this entire planet has this unique relationship with these billions and billions of microorganisms. And that's what makes all of us function.
Mm-hmm. Well, and they're not exactly the same, you know, on each person. Each person has their own mixture, you know. A lot of which is genetics and, you know, things like that as far as how they end up with it, but it's exposure and who knows what all combination goes to make up all of that for every single one of us.
Well, certainly our first inoculation comes through the birth canal. It's just not everybody has the benefit of going through a birth canal. And part of that is the medicalization of birth, and part of that is sometimes it's medically necessary for, in order to save the mother and the child, for it to come through a different avenue. What I really appreciate is how they're now realizing the vitality of getting that initial inoculation to the point where, you know, they may be going into the birth canal and swabbing it in order to then place those organisms on the child that has potentially come through a C-section. Because what they found, and you know, there's not enough longitudinal information at this point to make the causation correlation, but what they are finding is if you're inoculated with the bacteria from the skin rather than from the ones from the birth canal, that those children tend to have higher incidences of allergies, of, you know, food sensitivities, and lower immune systems. So it's really great that we're now understanding this information, because it gives those children who do have to be born that way an opportunity to also get the healthy bacteria they need to get that head start in life, because that's really where it starts. It's not just the DNA. Of course, the DNA is really vital, and that DNA is, you know, been built over millions, billions of years, generations of people consuming healthy foods in accordance to, you know, kind of traditional food pathways. And it's really just in the last couple of years that those pathways have been so disrupted by the chemicals and the GMOs and all the other things that have been put into the food supply that aren't part of what we have normally consumed for so long.
Mm-hmm. And how does the eating of the fermented foods, you know, help to improve the digestion?
Again, we're bacteria powered, and so they live inside of and on our bodies, and we're like a planet. We are the microcosm of the macrocosm. The amount of blood that's in our body is similar to the amount of water that covers the surface of the earth. Our lungs are like inverted trees, and so they do the opposite, where instead of making oxygen. They take in oxygen and release carbon dioxide. So having healthy bacteria in our gut soil, because our gut is truly the soil of our organism, and just like plants uptake nutrition by bacteria assimilating nutrition for them at the roots, that's kind of the roots. Our intestines, all the little villi sticking out there, are kind of like the roots of our humanity, of our human beingness. And so when we nurture that soil and put those healthy organisms back into the digestive system where they need to be, they then can allow us to extract nutrition from the foods we're consuming more efficiently. They create vitamins. They're also creating the immunoglobulins in our immune system. So all of these different fermented foods, they have different types of organisms. They make different acids. All of those are beneficial in different ways. And that's why that variety of fermented foods is so crucial as opposed to just relying on one. Although one can certainly be a gateway to others. And we think kombucha is a great way as a gateway into consuming more fermented foods in your diet because it tastes delicious. People tend to have a really immediate, palpable reaction when they consume it, and that then gets them excited about wanting to include more of these kind of savory, unique flavors into their diet.
So I know some people would have the argument on probiotic, where we're eating it, that it's not going to make it past the stomach acid. What's your response to that argument?
Well, but we're designed to eat them anyway, so whether they make it through or not, the DNA that it remains encapsulated in their bacteria when they are released into our guts, those also help to nutrify, and some of them do make it through. And that's why some of these fermented foods are so acidic, even by their own flavor and nature, because they're designed to kind of get in there and to increase or actually decrease the pH of our stomach acid. Unfortunately, because we're eating so many foods without including fermented foods at every meal, which was a staple of human life, our ketchup, our condiments, sauerkraut on your Reuben, salsas, chutneys, anything that we use that we traditionally think of as adding a little zip or zing, were originally fermented foods. And so we had, as human beings, a whole history of consuming these with every meal. And so their naturally acidic nature allows for our bodies to absorb that nutrition more efficiently. Right now, we're consuming foods that potentially raise the pH in our stomachs. We're not able then to digest our foods properly. We don't absorb the nutrition we need from them. So even though we're eating potentially healthy foods, our body can't unlock the nutrition within. And that's why, sour and bitter have been the flavors of health and nutrition for so long. But because our food supply has been over sugarified and our palates have shifted, that's why I think we have so much candida overgrowth, so many people suffering as a result of the food. While it tastes delicious, isn't serving our biological needs. And that's what Trust Your Gut is all about. That's kind of our little motto here at Kombucha Camp. And it's about listening to the biofeedback that your body is giving you. So when you consume a food, it's not just, are my taste buds stimulated? Because as we know now, there's also chemicals that they put into the food to stimulate this good taste thing going on. But it's, how does my body feel after I consume it? Am I, in the bathroom? Am I not in the bathroom? Do I have any kind of, reaction to this? Do I feel tired afterwards? Things like that. Starting to observe those signals and then tying that back to the foods you're consuming can be a really revelatory way of understanding what you're putting into your body and how it's affecting it. And so we recommend drinking kombucha first thing in the morning on an empty stomach, have just a couple ounces, and see how it makes your body feel. And by making that very specific connection, you start to close those biofeedback loops, right? An open loop, the energy is lost, but a closed loop, now we can kind of understand that feedback system and make changes according to the information we're receiving.
All right. Now, obviously, you're a big fan of kombucha. And can you explain a little bit more on how it is, what it is and how it's made, in a little more detail?
Absolutely. So the easiest way to think of kombucha is fermented tea. Another way to think about it would be tea vinegar, because it's an acetic acid ferment like vinegar, but it's a much weaker acetic acid. So I think of it as an easy drinking vinegar, not exactly the line most kombucha brewers are putting out there. Again, a lot of folks are trying to bridge that profile, right? A lot of people still really like sodas, like juices, like really sweet beverages. And so many of the kombucha producers, want to help people get into the category, so they tend to be a little sweeter. Now, mine is a balance of sweet and sour. I want that little sour punch, but then I need that teaspoon of sugar to help the medicine go down. So the way we make it is with tea and sugar. I have a little song for you here. Some folks might have heard it before, but I promise you will never forget how to make kombucha ever once you hear it. And I'm a terrible singer, so I'll just preface it with that. So please forgive my off-keyness, but here we go. It goes kombucha tea, easy as 1, 2, 3. Brew sweet tea, add a SCOBY, wait a week, and then repeat.
That works.
There we go. So the sweet tea part, that's tea and sugar. And all of this information, you can find the exact measurements for the recipe on kombuchacamp.com. It's camp with a K. You can also find it in our book, The Big Book of Kombucha. So I won't go into those details right here. But basically, it's tea and sugar. We add our SCOBY, which is our culture. It stands for Symbiotic Culture of Bacteria and Yeast. And it's a bacterial cellulose, so it's like this pellicle. It's kind of like a rubbery pancake. But it has several really great functions, one of which, of course, is protecting. It creates a lid and prevents harmful microorganisms from getting into the brew. And then it also acts as like a spaceship, so we take it from batch to batch, amongst many other things. But we add that SCOBY to it. Then we give it time to ferment. And that really is the hardest part of the process, because so many people, once they start drinking kombucha, they really, their body really appreciates it, and they're like, I want to get more. And so waiting is the hardest part. But in ideal conditions, which is anywhere from 75 to 85 degrees, with 80 being our sweet spot, between a week to 10 days for 1 gallon batch, most people find it has that sweet sour flavor that they enjoy. And so, once it's done, you will find that the culture has reproduced. So the really cool thing about kombucha and many other fermented food cultures is that they are infinite abundance in action. So just like all living organisms, if you feed them the nutritional inputs they need to thrive, they will. And it's kind of cool to know that you're creating a whole new SCOBY at home. And so it kind of has this, it appeals to people in the sense that it's kind of like a pet, but it's also good for you. And so there's like this very special relationship that occurs that maybe we wouldn't necessarily have with a carrot unless, of course, we grew that carrot.
Yeah.
But it's a really fun, easy process, and then you just continue it from there.
Yeah, and that's kind of the same concept sometimes that you can, depending on the kind of culture you have, that you do with yogurt, that at least especially if you're doing more of a traditional yogurt, not like coconut yogurt, where you take some from the one batch to create your next batch, basically, and that's kind of what you're doing with the kombucha. You're taking the active stuff and then like, okay, go to work on this batch now.
Exactly right. And the technical term is back slopping, which is really unattractive. So I talked to a lab guy. He's like, we'll call it serial transfer. I'm like, okay, that sounds good. Serially, it's like from one batch to anher. So that's
right down the line, yeah.
Exactly right. But it's the same with like the sourdough. You're using some from the batch before, or the kefir, of course, has grains. The coconut yogurt. Are you doing that with a milk kefir grain, or?
I'm actually using a probiotic.
Okay, yeah. So then, that one's not reproducing itself, but certainly there are ways you can make it with reproductive cultures. And so there's a lot of, the great thing with things like sauerkraut or beet kvass is the organisms are already present on the outside of the cabbage or the beets themselves. So all you need to do is create an environment where mold can't thrive by using salt, and it will just naturally ferment itself. You don't need any culture to get that started as well.
Yeah, that is real. I know cabbage is real easy to ferment. That's one of the easiest vegetables, obviously, on the planet to do that with. So what are some of your favorite fermented foods besides kombucha, of course?
Besides kombucha, I love kvass, the beet kvass. Now, traditionally in Russia, kvass is made with rye bread. I honestly have never even made it that way. I really love the beets. They're so good for you, and that little bit of saltiness, I like a lot of salt in my beet kvass, just really speaks to me. And I'll sometimes throw in some garlic or some ginger just to give it a little extra boost, especially at the colder times of year. Other ferments I love are sauerkraut. I don't personally make sauerkraut. The great thing about fermentation being really popular right now is many times you can go to the farmer's market or even to your favorite, local grocery store that has healthy foods and find living versions of these for, a reasonable price. And the nice thing is you're also employing a friend and neighbor in the community as well. So I love sauerkraut. I like to buy sauerkraut. And then at home, I also do milk kefir. And we also have water kefir. It's a little on the sweeter side, so it's not my favorite, but a lot of people enjoy it in the coconut water. But the milk kefir is really great because not only is it like kind of tangy and fresh, but whenever I have extra, I can then use it to make things like kefir pancakes. So it replaces buttermilk, yogurt, a bunch of different things. I can make kefir cheese with it, which I can use in dips. And so it's a really versatile product. And, for folks who can handle fermented dairy, it's a really very nutritious fermented food as well.
Okay, that's lots of good options there.
How about you? Other than the coconut yogurt, do you have some favorites you enjoy?
Mostly I do that because I have trouble with salt and sweet, getting too much of either of those, throws kind of my system out of whack. So some of the fermented foods like the sauerkraut don't always sit real well with me for that reason. And that's one of the reasons I've kind of mostly stuck with, doing the yogurt. I like it to not be real sweet, and that's one of the benefits of doing it yourself. You have more control over what's in it, kind of thing. So,
because unfortunately, like even with yogurt commercially, unless you're getting something that's like a heirloom culture or heirloom, whatever that is, you're ending up with something that's just like milk inoculated with 3 strains of bacteria and a bunch of sugar or carrageenan or, whatever thickeners, stabilizers and stuff in there. And so making it at home, you reduce the amount of potential additives to it. You also control the sweetness. So like my milk kefir's tiny, but then I add frozen fruit to it and make a really nice smoothie or a little touch of raw honey. So that way I'm controlling the sweetness factor and it still has a delicious flavor, but it isn't, someone else deciding how much sweetness I have.
Yeah, I don't actually, when I'm making the yogurt, I don't actually add any sweetener to it when I'm making it or, when I am eating it. Per se, I add fruit.
Right, and that's the sugar, right?
Yeah, that's the sugar. I don't need more. That's plenty. So that's pretty much the way I do that on that. And how is kombucha and other fermented foods, how does that work with people that have like candida overgrowth issues?
Right, so candida, I love this example. Primarily because we call it candida overgrowth. It's not that candida in and of itself is inherently bad for humans. We're supposed to have some of it in our digestive systems. The problem is that we're so over-toxified or we overutilize antibiotics or antibacterials that it atrophies the natural diversity of organisms in our body, in our guts. And when that happens, it allows something like a candida to overgrow. And then add to that, of course, the, tons of sugar that's added to our diets and, a lot of it highly processed, refined sugars that really don't deliver any nutritional value, but unfortunately stimulate yeast and things like this in our bodies. So what happens is we think this is in charge, right? This is our brain. Our brain's in charge. Your gut, to me, is your first brain. That's the one that if it's out of balance, this one's not going to work that right, And so really I think when we come back to the center of ourselves and realize, what it is we're feeding, that's what's going to help. So in terms of how these fermented foods and specifically kombucha can help with candida is, first of all, it needs to be a sour kombucha. So that's the thing. If you're buying it at the store, let it sit on the countertop for a few days, let it get nice and tangy so that has a little more of that sourness. The problem is, of course, when you have candida overgrowth, you crave sugar because that's what the yeast feed on is sugar. And so you kind of have to, override your taste buds and know that, hey, this is what's going to help to, get rid of this stuff. So you need a sour kombucha to begin with. The healthy acids in kombucha we have some known antifungals, caprylic acid, which is what the coconut's really great for. So like this is why I think people love the coconut water kefir or the coconut yogurt, is that it's got high amounts of caprylic acid that help balance that. So it's got caprylic acid, phenethyl alcohol. Both of these are antifungals and help support bringing the body back into balance. Basically, they create biofilms, right? So it's like the yeast create this like barrier, and these acids come in, right, and gently over time tear those biofilms apart and get rid of them. But what happens is those biofilms don't want to leave. They're like, no! And so you end up with these flare-ups, with it getting worse before it gets better. And so for a lot of people, they'll start drinking kombucha and think, oh no, it's making it worse. In fact, it's potentially you're going through a die-off process. And so each person has to decide for themselves, am I ready for a die-off process, or do I want to try, the coconut kefir or something else to bring more balance into my body before I go to that next step? But many folks who have had candida overgrowth and who drink kombucha find that within, a couple of weeks, and again, every body is different. This is just what some people have experienced, is that they find they kind of come out on the other side. Mm-hmm. And they don't have the same sugar cravings. They can drink the kombucha and it doesn't create those negative reactions. And that puts them back onto the path of, breaking through kind of the sugar brain that goes on with that, so that they can start to eat other foods and not feel terrible from it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense and stuff. But that is what you have to watch out for, is overriding your quote unquote natural cravings in that moment, because it's going to tell you to eat something sweet every single time. Exactly.
And that's why trust your gut isn't just trust your taste buds. Don't trust what your mind tells you is going to taste good. It's really listening. You eat that sugar and it tastes good, but how it makes you feel is terrible, bloated. You break out later. Exactly right. And so that biofeedback is saying, this isn't working. And so even though those taste buds are sending those signals saying, oh yeah, that's yummy, it's, that's where that disconnect is occurring.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense there. What's something that our listeners could do today to help heal their gut?
Go to the store, find a kombucha, and taste it. Again, the first one you grab off the shelf may not be a flavor you enjoy, but that's a great thing is, we have a bunch of different producers popping up all over the place, including lots of local producers. So maybe your farmer's market or local health food store is a great place to start. And what's really interesting about the kombucha brewers is that many of them are like you. They've experienced a health challenge. They found that incorporating kombucha in their diet on a regular basis had a positive effect. It wasn't the only thing. They probably had many other changes they made, but it was something that they could immediately feel good about consuming. And that inspired them to want to share it with others. And so they started a business. So going out and supporting those local brewers is a great way to give yourself a taste, see how your body feels. Then, when your thirst outgrows your budget, you come looking for me at kombuchacamp.com. We're bacteria farmers. We've got all the kits and supplies and information, everything you could need to do it safely at home. And just, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. And in the case of kombucha, it begins with a single sip. So who knows where that first sip of kombucha is going to take you in your life, but go ahead and give it a try. That's the first thing I would recommend people to do.
All right. I'll have to give it a try.
Yeah, let us know how you like it.
All right. So tell our listeners about your free gift for them.
Absolutely. So at Kombucha Camp, we keep our prices low year-round. Not only do we have quality information that you can get for free on our website, including our free ebook you can download at kombuchacamp.com/DIY. We then have quality supplies. So we give you the best start possible. We have great packages if you need everything all in one place. And then we back that up with quality support. So now you've got all the supplies. What do I do? Send us an email, get in touch with us. We're always happy to help guide you through the process. And so that would be the best way to get a hold of us. And so what we like to do then is offer you a free gift with purchase. We keep our prices low year-round just so we can give you all of that quality information, supplies, and support. And so then when you place your order in the notes section, just type in free gift. Depending on what you purchased, we'll match up a free gift that works for that. That could be a thermometer strip, a flavoring pack, an extra brewer cap, all kinds of things. And, because we're a small family business, you can also call me directly and place your order by phone. I can answer the questions you have about which is the right package for you. I always, just give you the information so you make an informed choice. and let your gut tell you what's the right products for you. And just let me know that you heard about me on Leah Klein's Gut Health Summit 2.0, and I'd be happy to throw in a free gift for you.
All right, that sounds great. And we will have a link for this on the speaker page as well, but that's Kombucha Camp, K-A-M-P, on the end, .com is where you find all of that. Thank you, Hannah, for joining me today. It's been fun.
Thanks, Leah. Been great to be here and talk about bacteriosapiens.
All right. And thank you, everyone, for listening. Come back tomorrow for more of the Gut Health Turnaround series.